We are back. It's the Joe Holka Show presented by FanDuel. Week 3, games of the week, DFS stacks, best bets, all that good stuff. You're going to want to stick around until the end, of course, because we are going to be building a FanDuel team live. That team will be in the Listener League at FanDuel.com/Holka, so make sure you get in there before it fills. $5, rake free, big prizes, quite literally the best contest in all of DFS. Obviously going to be reviewing a bunch of those lineups from that tournament every Monday live on stream as well. Reebs is back with us at Lord Reebs on Twitter. You guys know him from sharpfootballanalysis.com. If you don't know who Reebs is, Rich Hribar, how we doing, my man? It's been not too long, but I'll say this. You gave up your Listener League lead that you had after week 1, my man. How does it feel to be, I guess, tied now with TJ Hernandez?
It hurts. I was invested in the Bills, and I was watching that game. We had Josh Allen slide down at the 1-yard line, had a touchdown reversed. The Dolphins didn't punch back to help out at all, and we limped into 4 p.m. and just didn't crash anything. The lineup wasn't bad. It just had a bunch of guys that got 15 points. No one did anything good. It was fine. It was fine.
It could have been worse because, I guess it could have been better because TJ was the only one that had the big dog Derrick Henry. So basically, I guess by default, I actually don't know if any of you guys had Cooper Kupp, believe it or not. I might have to check that. But weird week for me overall. Honestly, probably one of my worst weeks I've had in quite some time. If you were kind of waiting around for that game in the afternoon with the Cowboys and with the Chargers, it didn't end so hot for you unless you had Cooper Kupp in the beginning and maybe you backed into that touchdown from Najee late. That was kind of like that chalk that you needed, or else you're probably just blowing up your lineups at that point, because I know I was doing a lot of wheeling and dealing on FanDuel.
And it worked out. I mean, the Cowboys and Chargers didn't hit either.
Exactly.
So the pivots at least got people back on the dance floor. I just, didn't go in on Derrick Henry enough. I really thought it was a similar layout last week, and I thought the first half of that game. I was like, "Ooh, what a great call!" Big dog's not eating. The Seahawks are running away with this. They're up, 15 points. I'm like, this is perfect. This is exactly what I needed and then Derrick Henry just brought them back from the grave and put me in the grave.
I was like kind of tilting it a little bit because like here I am with like these lower owned Derrick Henry shares again, and he wasn't doing anything. I kind of got a little bit upset, and then he came back and almost gave me like a backdoor min cash on like a terrible lineup. That's how crazy week 2 was. But let's not waste any time, Reebs. Yeah. Let's move right on to week 3. This is a forward-thinking show. This is one of these segments that I look forward to each and every week to go through some of the top games that everyone's kind of been talking about, but also let's see if we can find a little bit of under-the-radar value for some people in the betting market. So game number 1. We have, I guess, a familiar type of situation here, but now we have the Chargers at Chiefs. The Chiefs are 6.5-point home favorites per FanDuel Sportsbook. The over is getting a ton of steam so far, 50% of the bets, but 91% of the money. So definitely an interesting spot again. Now we're in Arrowhead with the Chargers. So what are your thoughts on this one overall? I think it's going to be a pretty popular game.
Yeah, and it should be. I mean, right now, the Chargers have just kind of been a little bit snake bitten, but they lead the NFL in yards created per drive. The Kansas City Chiefs allow the most yards per drive, coincidentally. But the Chargers just have had turnovers and mistakes in the red zone that have kind of held them back from scoring touchdowns. Like I said, they lead the NFL in yards per drive. They're tied for the NFL in getting drives into the red zone with 10, but they're second to last in red zone conversion rate for touchdowns. Justin Herbert's been really kind of bad inside the 10-yard line, and they just haven't been able to convert drives. They've only punted twice in 2 games, the Chargers. So, I mean, they're moving the ball. They're just not able to get in the paint here. But if you want to get and convert some drives into touchdowns, facing the Kansas City Chiefs isn't a bad start. So last year, the Chiefs were dead last in red zone conversion rate allowed. 73% of opponent red zone possessions went for touchdowns. They've already opened the year allowing all 8 red zone possessions to go for touchdowns against them. So hopefully we get kind of the meeting of both worlds where they collide and the Chargers are able to convert some of these drives. I mean, Justin Herbert has thrown for 337, 338 yards both 2 weeks, just the 1 touchdown each game. 2 came off the board last week. He's been knocking on the door. Everything's been there peripherally. Just hasn't been able to get those touchdowns to come along with it. This would be a good spot to kind of start. The Chargers right now basically doubled down and let us know that this Big Mike thing is real. He was someone I was kind of like, all right, Eckler didn't catch any passes week 1. Maybe, if Eckler gets some targets, we'll see Big Mike's targets come down. Same
Yeah,
role.
one of
He
those
is.
things happened.
Yep. He is operating as the complete alpha, perimeter alpha in this offense. His ADOT has gone down, has been 10 and 9.3. The opening two games are getting him easy looks. He has 4 end zone targets in 2 games. He's dirt cheap in this game. I think he'll be a popular play. We also have Austin Eckler did get those targets, like you said. One of those things did happen last week. Now, the Chiefs have opened up with the Ravens and the Browns their first 2 games, 2 teams that run on everybody. So, of course, they've run on a team like the Chiefs. But we also inherently know that we've got a multiple year sample that the Chiefs give up a ton of yardage, all purpose yardage to running backs. And Austin Eckler's been no stranger to stacking all purpose yardage against them. The past 5 times these 2 teams have played, he's averaged 19 fantasy points per game, 109.2 yards for scrimmage in those 5 matchups. He's another guy that's kind of hanging around. The price bump really hasn't happened because he hasn't smashed the ceiling. But he's another guy that we've already seen the goal line touches. He converted a 2-point conversion last week to kind of let us know he still does have that role early in the season. The backup situation kind of flip flopped. It was Larry Roundtree week 1. Last week it was Justin Jackson, but it's really all been Austin Eckler. And then Keenan Allen just keeps doing his thing, man. Last week he didn't really have the high ceiling game a lot of people were expecting, but this back-to-back 100-yard games to open the season. We've seen the target sample with Justin Herbert. I think the Chargers side is really easy to kind of pinpoint what you want to kind of glom onto. You can go back to the well and punt on Jared Cook if you want. The opportunity was there from a snap and routes run perspective. Just had that touchdown come off the board, but I think the Chargers side is pretty simple here.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like Tyreek is so expensive in this game on the other side of it, 8,700 for him. But man, Keenan Allen at 6,900, that's a nice little discount for him. I'm totally with you on Austin Eckler. That's the guy that I was going to bring up because you said it. This is the exact way that you kind of attack this Chiefs team. Like there's 2 things that always go kind of in the favor of these pass catching running backs. It's basically that's basically what they allow you to have, but also the game script should be kind of in his favor as well. Like if they end up jumping ahead here and Austin Eckler just kind of is in catch-up mode, ends up racking up like these 5 to 8 catches. Again, this is a great spot for him at 7K. Obviously, he kind of retained that role at the goal line, which I really liked. So this is a spot where there's going to be a lot of really expensive players. We built a lineup earlier this week with Ryan Hodge, and it's not easy to get in that premium double with Kansas City with Kelsey and Tyreek. Like, do you have any interest in a guy like Mecole Hardman? He seems like he's still he's kind of getting the air yards and some of the targets. He's been involved regardless of kind of how he's played over the last little while. Like, is there anything, I guess, outside of Big Mike that can give us a little bit of sour relief in this one?
Yeah, I think there are 2 guys. I mean, Hardman actually on Sunday night looked like a functional receiver for the first time in a while instead of just kind of a jet sweep kind of vertical guy. But Brian Pringle gets the touchdown. Demarcus Robinson gets the touchdown. Kind of one of always those thorn guys. But he had 8 targets in the 5 for 55. I don't love him per this site scoring. I don't think it really helps Mecole Hardman. But he would be a guy that I think offers a little bit of relief. And before it even became kind of contrarian, I actually believe that this game does set up well for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's got been kind of a punching bag and kind of like a meme this week. But so here's the thing. We talked about this last week with the Cowboys. So Brandon Staley's defense, it's designed to one thing: play shell coverage, give you light box looks, and have your good safeties fill run lanes. So that's what they have with Derwin James, what they did with the Rams. They invite you to run the football. They give you multiple light box looks. We saw it with Antonio Gibson in week 1. Only 5% of his carries came against loaded boxes. We saw it last week with the Cowboys who built a game plan around this. They only faced the heavy box in 17% of their runs, 5 of 29 carries. And in the opening 2 games, teams have run 52 times for 287 yards with their running backs and a pair of touchdowns against the Chargers. This is what this defense is designed to do. They want you to check into runs because they've got good safety play that can come in and fill run lanes. That's what they want you to do, and teams have been successful doing it the opening 2 weeks. The Chiefs are going to get a ton of 2 high safety looks in this game. They are going to be checking into runs. This is what they kind of went and upgraded their offensive line for. We had a couple games like this at the beginning of last year, the Houston Texans game and the Buffalo Bills game, where the Chiefs faced a ton of 2 high safeties, and they ran down those teams' throats with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Then Clyde Edwards-Helaire gets hurt, the offensive line falls apart, and they kind of move off of that throughout the course of the season as teams continued to flood them with 2 high safety looks. And then they started acquiescing and, moving Tyreek Hill around. And then you obviously have Travis Kelsey, who led the NFL. He had 70 receptions for 965 yards and 7 touchdowns against 2 high safety looks last year. Now, the Chargers do have a guy in Derwin James who hasn't really been available for these matchups with Travis Kelsey. He's only been available for 3 of the times the Chargers and Chiefs have played. It'll be interesting to see if they use him in any unique way to try to combat Travis Kelsey, but Travis Kelsey absolutely decimated 2 high safety looks last year. It took an already great player and played into the strengths of that great player and gave him a ton of target volume. I would expect to see something similar here because that's how Brandon Staley's defense operates. This is what they're going to do. They're going to invite the Chiefs to run the football, and they're going to give you looks up the seams in those intermediate levels. They're not going to try to give up the 1 and 2 play touchdown drives. That's what the defense is designed to do. It was disappointing though to see the Chiefs not be able to combat what the Ravens did with Tyreek Hill. He had just 4 targets, 14 yards. It was his fewest yardage total in a game since week 13 of 2018.
Wow.
Yeah, I would expect to see that bounce back. And we also have a sample now here with the Chargers, though. I mean, Terry McLaurin, 4 for 62. Amari Cooper, 3 for 24. Like I said, they don't like to give up those huge plays. So, I mean, it could be a situation where the Chiefs have to do what they did with Tyreek last year. Start moving him around more, using him more as a yak-centric guy instead of the deep targets. And they did that effectively towards the end of last season. So it's going to be a nice cat and mouse game between the Chiefs, Andy Reid calling plays, and what Brandon Staley inherently wants to invite them to do offensively.
Reeves, you're worked up today, man. I like it. I'll say this. There's better places to probably play CEH, I would imagine, than on FanDuel. He's a little bit more expensive on FanDuel, which maybe he ends up being kind of a lower-owned option for us this week. So I think that's interesting. He's not going to be in my core, but definitely think that if they continue to get him involved, I don't get like the Andy Reid vibes that he's just going to completely bury this guy after 1 fumble. So I think hopefully for some of the best ball shares, CEH is still going to be okay going forward. So Reeves, before we move on to the next game, I need your best bet. And then if you were to stack this one up, what would be your priorities?
I like the Chargers getting the points here. The Chiefs have covered in just 1 of their past 10 games played. They're a public money team. The Vegas has been living off of people betting on the Chiefs because, like I said, they've covered just once in their past 10 games. I think that the Chargers actually get some of these drives to convert into touchdowns to this game. I don't know if they outright win, but 6.5, I think the Chargers can hang around and score some points in this game.
I like it. Game number 2, we have Seattle at Minnesota. We have the Vikings home opener, which I might be at. We'll see. It's an afternoon game, so we'll see if I can get there for at least half the game before Tilt Space starts, so that'll be fun. Seahawks.
How far are you from there?
I am a pitching wedge away from the stadium, Reeves, so I could just walk over there and just see if there's any kind of pulse around the stadium. That might be fun if I don't actually go in. But yeah, it's another one of these. We talked about it before we jumped on, Reeves, but there's a pretty tight spread in a couple of these games with high totals. So the Seahawks are actually 1.5-point road favorites right now per FanDuel Sportsbook. So I guess the under is actually giving a little bit of love, but not a ton of sharp action in this one so far. What are your initial thoughts on Seattle at Minnesota?
Yeah, this one's interesting. I can see why the under is kind of getting a little bit of sharp action early because when you look at these teams, they can score in spurts, but they also they're really streaky and they have kind of spurts where they just don't look good offensively, right? And we saw that with both teams last week. Both of these teams are great in the first half. We thought the Vikings were going to give us a real nice shootout and then kind of went dormant in the second half. The Vikings have actually punted on 54% of their drives. It's the highest rate in the NFL. Guess who's 31st? Seattle Seahawks. They punted on 50% of their drives. So I could see how that is. Russell Wilson's just been doing his Russell Wilson thing, though, man. Super efficient. He leads the NFL in fantasy passing points per pass attempt through 2 weeks. Get this, against the blitz so far this season, Russell Wilson's open 9 of 9 for 159 yards. That's 17.7 a clip and 2 passing touchdowns.
Wow.
You don't want to send any heat at Russ this early in the season because he's been absolutely decimating them. We also like this, too, from an efficiency stance because Kirk Cousins is also a really efficient quarterback for us. The Vikings, as a team, lead the league in catchable target rate so far through 2 weeks. And, going back to last season, Kirk Cousins now has multiple passing touchdowns in 10 of his past 11 games played. So we've got that kind of working for us for a little bit of upside, too. But these teams are streaky. I've seen some people bring up that, Seattle hasn't allowed, a top 12 scoring quarterback going back into last year, their last 8 games. Look at the quarterbacks this Seahawks defense.
I hate those stats. It's just so stupid.
Carson Wentz, they faced twice. Colt McCoy, Sam Darnold, Dwayne Haskins, C.J. Beathard, Jared Goff. And they faced Tannehill last week. Tannehill threw for 350 yards and 9 yards attempt. It's just that the big dog took all the tuds. Yeah. He sucked them up. He took them all. So this Seattle defense, I still don't believe is very strong in the back end. They've got cornerbacks we can take advantage of. On the Vikings end, if they're going to be chasing points, obviously Adam Thielen regression, hold my beer regression. He, after leading the NFL and end zone targets last year at 20. He comes out, converts his first 3 in the first 2 games. It was a complete Adam Thielen game last week, 6 for 39, but he gets in the paint. That's what he does. Justin Jefferson still leads the team in targets. But, KJ Osborne and Adam Thielen have been, kind of taking some of the receptions and yardage away from him. But, Jefferson did score in week 1 or last week. He should have scored in week 1. He was down at the 1-yard line. They kind of reviewed it. It was kind of questionable. But he has still turned in 2 usable weeks. It's not like he's been like a complete drag either. So, 9 and 10 targets open. We'll take those. I think the field is sharp on it. I think we're going to see guys like Robert Woods and Justin Jefferson and DK Metcalf be popular, whereas in years past they probably wouldn't be. I think they'll all be pretty popular plays this week. And then KJ Osborne, this team has shifted to playing a lot of 11 personnel. They did not do this the last 2 years. They ran 11 personnel at the lowest rate in the NFL last year. Because of the injury to Irv Smith, they've kind of opened things up. And KJ Osborne has kind of been a benefactor. He's run a passer out of 90% of the team dropbacks the first 2 weeks, giving us nice usable lines, had a 64-yard touchdown. If you're able to pivot to him in the late game, you got a nice little bump last week. And then, Tyler Conklin still is out there, man. He's getting some cardio. He's run a passer out on 60% and 66% of team dropbacks. So, when you talk about these tight end punt plays, you at least want guys that are out on the field in these offenses that are able to move the ball. So, it's a squint and see situation with Tyler Conklin, but he is out there in a situation where we might want to be in on the passing game.
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed about this game also on the other side, Reeves, is that it's an amazing spot for Tyler Lockett again. So if people want to keep pinballing back between Lockett and Metcalf, that's fine. But I do think that Lockett is going to get probably the better draw. This Vikings defense was supposed to be better this year, and they really haven't been so far. So I do like the idea of going back to Lockett. KJ Osborne, probably one of the more popular waiver wire pickups this week. So I think there's a lot to like in this game. You mentioned Russ. He's just been tossing the ball so far downfield forever. It seems like he's always up towards the top of the league when we're looking at stuff like average intended air yards, but he's also a top 5 completion rate above expectation type of player too. So the efficiency is going to be there. So I guess on the Seahawks side, what do we think about the run game in this one? Is it still just basically going to be the rush show for at least one more week?
We know that they want to because, Pete will always talks about this magic number of 33 or 34. What is it? Rushes plus completions. It's such an old logic.
Is that confirmed that he said that? Did he actually say that?
Yeah, this is the thing. I think it's the rule. It's the rule of 52, right? Maybe the chat can help us. It's something like that, right? It's completions plus rush attempts, and he's subscribed by this logic. But this Vikings defense is interesting because they still are good up front. They're getting pressure on the quarterback both games. They're second league in sacks, but this back end hasn't held up. They're 27th in the league in passing points allowed per pass attempt. Dead last in completion rate allowed, 78%, and they're allowing 10.5 yards per pass attempt, which is 31st. They're giving up the big play, which is what you're going to get from Seattle. This is what Russ is going to maximize those shots when he takes them. He might not throw it 35 times, but those 5 to 6 times a game where he throws it deep, he's going to make them count. The Vikings have allowed a 66.7% completion rate and throws over 15 yards downfield so far. That's 28th in the NFL, and they've allowed a touchdown in each game on those vertical throws. Lockett. Metcalf has had the same amount of targets as Tyler Lockett in both games, just hasn't hit. He did, again, he hasn't not buried anybody. He just hasn't given us that spike week. There's still opportunity there. I don't know really what to make of Chris Carson because we didn't get the receptions last week. And, he was out there still running a pass route, but, he saved that game with those 2 touchdowns. He only had 31 yards, but he had those 2 bunnies. There is always that worry. And they upped his price a lot on FanDuel. He went up a full $1,000 in salary this week. So you're not getting any kind of that, value there. It's an interesting week for running backs in general because we've got Dalvin and the big dog up top, but CMC is playing on Thursday night. Aaron Jones is on Sunday Night Football. Zeke, if you want to go back there, is on Monday night. So we've got a 2-man kind of salary gap at the top, and then it's kind of pick your poison underneath in terms of value. So I do think Dalvin and the big dog will be popular, but to go all the way up just a rung below that for Chris Carson at 77, it's tough. It's tough to do.
Yeah, Man, the running backs in this game kind of have my mind in a pretzel right now because I feel like people might be sleeping a little bit on Dalvin Cook. Like, obviously, in week 1, he gets in the box, but didn't really do a whole lot on the ground. Last week, the opposite. He had 22 attempts on the ground for over 100 yards, but he didn't really do as much in terms of getting the touchdown. So, like, if he can put those games together, like, I mean, he's still getting elite usage, right? Like, the first week, he had 26 touches, and they're saying that he's completely healthy. We're not too worried about, was it a toe or a foot or something? I feel like he gets hurt every game. So, at that point, like, I'm not worried about Dalvin unless he, like, stops practicing. But have you heard anything else on the injury? And then I'm curious your favorite stack in this game as we kind of move forward.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Mike Zimmer came out and said that, this is an 0-2 team. Like, if he's healthy enough to play, they're going to give him the ball, as much as they can. And when these two teams played last year, the Vikings ran all over Seattle. They ran for 200 yards that game. It was the most rushing yards Seattle allowed all of 2020. That was the game Dalvin Cook got hurt at halftime. He had 90 yards and a touchdown at halftime. Then Madison came in and ran 20 times for 112 yards.
Right.
Yeah. And then he missed. Dalvin Cook missed the next week. Everyone played Madison against the Falcons. They go down. They're losing. Yeah. They're losing 20-0, and Madison's just dead, and it's just terrible chalk.
I was at that game. It was like a Packer game or something. It was like the worst game ever. It was like 12-3, and I'm sitting there with all the Alexander Madison and just watching like nothing happen. He's like 50% owned. It was not fun. Not fun. Let's not do that again ever.
I mean, I do think that all the receivers are in play here. Like, pick your poison. I do think that Justin Jefferson is in another good spot. The volume's been there. Both DK Lockett, I think, are great plays. The bummer is where's the game where like both these guys are going to do good? It's so maddening that we have to be on the right side of it every time. Like, they should be good enough with Russell Wilson where like both of these guys should have weeks where they both hit, right? Like, they should. It should be. But, hey, we rarely get it. But I think those guys are great plays. Obviously, you can run it back with Dalvin if he's the running back you want to pay up for. You can go with Derrick Henry, I think, but I think it's such an obvious Derrick Henry week. And then I'm with this quarterback situation with the Colts with Brett Hundley and, Jacob Eason. I don't know if there's enough punchback on the, because I like A.J. Brown, too, in that game. But I don't know if there's enough punchback for passing volume for the Tennessee side. So, I mean, the big dog's going to be popular again.
Yeah, and we noticed this too, that like on FanDuel, like the big dog's always popular. It's just one of those things that if people are playing both sites, like that's where they're going to play Derrick Henry. So even if you think you're going to get him some 10% owned in a bad spot, like even last week in the Monster, he was still like 18% owned in a not great spot in general. So definitely keep an eye on that. Not a ton of sharp action, like I said, in this game. So let's move on to game number 3, Tampa Bay at the LA Rams. The Bucs are actually -1 favorites on the road currently. This is one of the ones that we talked a little bit about with Matt Harmon. So if you haven't checked out the 3 trending wide receivers video and you're watching this, definitely watch that video next. We talked about a couple guys in this game that we're super high on. But Reeves, Tampa Bay and the Rams, this is like 2 probably really good football teams. But man, I like these tight spreads, high total. Like there should be some fireworks in this one.
Yeah, I mean, the Bucs have been just excellent. Going back into last year, in their last 9 games, they're averaging 35 points per game. They have opened up with like a really awesome schedule. The Cowboys and Falcons are going to be teams we pick on regularly for offensive points. And, Tom Brady's taken advantage of that. When these teams played a year ago, though, Brady had his worst completion rate and his lowest yards per pass attempt, 4.5 yards per pass attempt when these teams played last year. Now, Brandon Staley's gone. They have Raheem Morris. They're doing a couple different things. And Brady's been so hot that, how do we really fade Tom Brady? Because it's not just the start of the season. He's thrown multiple passing touchdowns now in 13 consecutive games. It's the longest active streak in the league, and it's 1 short of his all-time record. He can match this week if he get there again with a couple passing touchdowns. He is expensive, though, and I don't know if it's a game where he completely kind of like gives you like the 30-point upside, because this is, again, too, like the Rams are going to invite them to run a little bit more than they have so far, so we'll see if they do it. But the Buccaneers so far to start the season, they are second in the NFL in passing rate on first down. So they're just letting Brady wing it around. We kind of joke that they're trying to boost that yard so he could break the record in Foxborough next week, and he's kind of set himself up to do it. So we'll see what happens. But with this AB thing throws a little bit of a wrinkle in things. AB was looking to be like my run back in this game because he led the team in targets when these teams played a year ago. Now with him potentially, he's not officially rolled out yet, but it's kind of dire. He has to have 2 negative tests within a 48-hour window, and also has to not have COVID too. So he has to clear his COVID, then have 2 negative tests in 48 hours. He can still play if he could do that, but it's a high hurdle with the time frame that we've got. If he doesn't play, Last year, it was Scottie Miller in that role. He ran a pass route on 69% of the team dropbacks before AB got there, 26% after. When AB missed the NFC Championship game against the Packers, it was Miller again who got the bump in terms of routes and snaps too, instead of Tyler Johnson, who's kind of more of Godwin's backup. The interesting side here too is that this Rams defense has kind of really shifted to where they were last year. And they started to do this at the end of last year, but they've really leaned into it under Raheem Morris. Is Jalen Ramsey's basically playing like a sub linebacker position. He plays like in the slot against the run. He's one of those guys filling those run fits. He's played 48 slot coverage snaps already to open the season. Then the only other DB for the Rams to play even more than one is Darius Williams at 17, a huge gap. When these teams played a year ago, Jalen Ramsey played in the slot for 5 total snaps. Jalen, we do a lot of, whatever, cornerback, wide receiver analysis and what it doesn't matter. I mean, I do believe Jalen Ramsey is one of those guys that does matter on defense. Sure. So, I mean, there is a little bit of overlap now with AB being out of the game, and now, Ramsey being kind of one of those guys is probably going to find himself in Godwin's territory a little bit more than anyone else. It kind of hurts little things. It makes you just want to funnel a little bit maybe more to Mike Evans as the run back in this game. Because, Evans is a guy, too, that even though he gives us like a lower floor than the other guys, he gets the types of targets we look for. Vertical targets, end zone targets. That's Mike Evans' game. And if AB's going to not be in this game and not have his target share, they're only going to throw the football to 3 guys, really. Mike Evans, Gronk, and Chris Godwin. So, I mean, maybe Evans is the guy that looks like the guy that you run back with this. But I am very excited about the other side of this game because we've already seen it happen 2 games into this season. Nobody tries to run on the Bucs. Opposing offenses have the highest pass rate against the Bucs. Last year when these teams played, Sean McVay devised a game plan that just completely chucked the run game. Los Angeles Rams running backs last year when these teams played had 16 carries for 40 yards. With Jared Goff, he dropped back to pass 51 times. Now with Matthew Stafford, we're going to get some fireworks here because Stafford's had just 59 dropbacks in 2 games. The 2 dropbacks in the games that we've seen the Buccaneers face, Dallas dropped back 62 times and the Falcons dropped back 48 times. We could easily see Stafford approach his season-long dropback total through 2 weeks in 1 game here. And Goff threw for 380 yards in that game. They had a great game plan, and the Bucs have been giving up production. They are still limiting efficiency, and they limited some efficiency against Dallas too, but teams throw so much against them that the counting stats just always get there. They are allowing just 6.6 yards per pass attempt. That's 9th in the NFL, and 9.1 yards per completion, which is 3rd. But 300 passing yards allowed because the volume just gets there. So I like Matthew Stafford. I've been looking at some projected ownership, and we were so early. It's Thursday afternoon, but Stafford looks to be kind of the guy I'm looking at the most in terms of projected ownership because I really think that he's going to drop back around 50 times in this game. So I really like him. I don't care about the Darrell Henderson injury because I don't want to play any running back that's in this game against the Bucs because they're not going to be really involved in the passing game. So we got Cooper Kupp. No one wants to guard Cooper Kupp. I saw Cynthia Freeland had a stat that he is the only player that has multiple touchdown now receptions where no one's been within 5 yards of him. So no, he scheme and defense, he's just been running free. Last year in this matchup, Kupp had 11 catches for 145 yards. Tampa Bay has been brutal in the slot so far because their starting slot corner, who probably was the weakest link anyway, Sean Murphy-Bunting's been on IR. Ross Cockrell has replaced him. He's allowed 140.4 quarterback rating and targets into his coverage so far to start the season. So again, like you talked with Lockett, I mean, Kupp is set up again in another great spot. It doesn't have to be one of these things, well, hey, the wheel's going to come off. He's not going to have one of these weeks every week. It's another objectively good spot for him. I think people are going to play a lot of Robert Woods. I want to play Robert Woods too. We don't know what happened week 1 when he didn't really run a lot of pass routes, just 2/3 of the pass routes in week 1, but he came right back last week, was in on 97% of the pass plays, had his 9 targets. He was another guy. The game plan is built around this passing game last year, and he had 15 targets in this game last year. He had 130 yards and a touchdown. I also really like Van Jefferson in this game. He's run a pass route on 85% and 100% of the team dropbacks. And remember, I talked about the dropbacks. Stafford's only had 59 dropbacks. if he gets that approach to that number in one game this week, those 3 targets that Van Jefferson's had could be 5 to 7 targets in a single game. It's just been the passing volume hasn't been there for them. And then Higbee as well. He's another guy. The target just didn't find him last week, but was in on 100% of the plays. The Bucks have allowed kind of moderate games against tight ends so far. The Dallas tight ends had 9 receptions against them. The Falcons tight ends had 7 catches last week. So I'm pretty into this Rams passing game a lot this week.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's almost the opposite of what we normally talk about with Tampa Bay because it's so spread out. Who do you go to? I feel that same way about the Rams at times. Like I like Van Jefferson, especially on FanDuel. He's 4,900. He's so cheap, and he can basically hit value on a couple big plays. He's got a top 20 ADOT in the league. We just talked about it with Harmon on one of the other segments. And then Tyler Higbee, everyone wants to play him last week, so it feels like a good spot to go back to him in this spot. And then Robert Woods, he's the cheapest, I guess, of the wide receivers. Like it's a drastic difference between Cooper Kupp at this point on FanDuel. So I think that he's going to get a ton of ownership. So these Rams guys, like I think that they're going to gain some steam. I haven't heard anyone really talk about Stafford yet, but that might be a way to kind of get access to them a little bit more indirectly if you wanted to single stack. And then if you want to bring it back on the other side with one of these Tampa Bay guys like Evans or Godwin. So this is a really interesting game, and there's going to be so many pass attempts on both sides. It's going to be a pace-up situation. No one wants to run against Tampa Bay, like you said. Even on the other side, like Tampa Bay doesn't really want to run that much now anyways. So it's a really good spot, I think, for DFS, and some of the prices are definitely not too hard to get to. Reeves, if you had to like narrow it down to like a top stack in this game, would you rather be on the Stafford side or would you rather be on the Brady side, you think?
I'm leaning towards the Stafford side. I'm looking at quarterback projected ownership this week, and like I said, it's early. We might not get there, but I mean, I feel like people are missing the boat on Stafford.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
I'm with you. I don't think anyone.
I know
likes
a lot
to,
of
no
people
one
are
likes
going to
play
play Woods.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I think a lot of people are going to play Woods this week, and especially even on FanDuel because he's 61. You've got Big Mike at 6. And I think we'll see Chase Claypool be popular at 58 once we get this official word on Deontay Johnson. It looks pretty much that he's going to be out at this point of the week. So I think those 3 guys in that price range are going to be really popular.
Yeah, and then you don't have to worry about, I guess, paying all the way up for Cooper Kupp if you didn't want to. But, man, he's expensive, but it's probably, I mean, it's worth it. And everything that I really care about at the wide receiver position, like weighted opportunity rating, basically looking at market share and air yards, he's number 2 in the league behind Brandon Cooks when it comes to that. And there's been volume. So there's such thing as quality of targets in some ways, too. So I would rather have the targets coming from Matthew Stafford than whoever's starting for Houston. Who is even starting for Houston? I don't even know.
Not to take a quick week 2 victory lap, but I might not get it because it could be short-lived. Yep. But I have a take, and you can receipt this on Twitter, where I talk about my 2 teammate hot takes for the season, where I had Cooper Kupp ahead of Robert Woods in fantasy drafts this season and rankings, and I had Deebo Samuel over Brandon Ayuk.
Let's go.
We're looking good 2 weeks in.
Love it, man. All right, you ready to build a FanDuel lineup?
Yeah, sure.
Let's do it. So I guess was there anything else in that game before we move on? You sounded like I know you could go forever on these. So I'll make sure I didn't cut you off.
Well, I mean, listen, if you want to get cute with the Bucks back, I think we've seen 2 weeks in. It's basically Leonard Fournette, right? The similar thing to the playoffs. Okay. Like, it looks like he's the guy. Like out of there, it looks like Gio Bernard is dust. By the way.
That's unfortunate for the late round running back shares, but man, maybe he is just dust. I don't know. If it's Fournette again, when no one just wants to go back to him, like I wouldn't be super surprised. So the Joe Holka Show Listener League, this is a $5 rake-free big prizes. We talk about it as being the best contest in all of DFS, definitely the best contest on FanDuel. So make sure you guys get in there before it fills. This is way more than we had at this point last week. So 2,000 person tournament. We're already about half full. So make sure you guys get in there. FanDuel.com/Holka. Even if you are coming over there, maybe just a FanDuel for the first time. If you haven't played on FanDuel in a while, that's where you want to start to get in the Listener League. You do get a max deposit bonus by going through that link also. So Reeves is now tied with TJ Hernandez in our little guest showdown in this contest. So both of you guys have cashed 1 week. Jake Seeley has not cashed either week so far. So we'll have, I guess, to talk to him about that in the next segment. But Reeves, what do we want to start with here? Do we want to go with the stack? Do we want to, I guess, piece together a few of your top leverage plays? What are we thinking? 2,000 person contest, so it is a little bit larger than some of the smaller field stuff we normally talk about.
All right. Well, listen, I like to build these lineups for this segment. I hate to come on and do a stack show and then not play some of the games we talked about. I
Yep.
want to play the games we talked about. That's the whole reason. I know that some of these picks will be chalky, but it's the whole point segment of the show, right? We want to build lineups around what we just talked about. I don't want to just pick a whole lineup. I don't want to talk for 40 minutes about these games and not pick any one of these games.
Yeah, for anyone watching, this is a segment we do on Thursday. So if you're watching this on like Saturday or Sunday morning, definitely know that ownership and some things can change. So check out some of the later stuff that we have going on. So anyways, go ahead.
All right, so let's start it off with Stafford, just because, like I said, he's my conviction kind of QB play this week. And ownership could change, but I'm looking at projected ownership, and I'm seeing him come in around like the QB 8, QB 10. I thought Herbert would be the guy I would be most interested in this week, but looking at the gap, it looks like Herbert, people are on him early in the week for good reason. But I'm going to start with Stafford. So we'll bring Stafford back with let's do the double stack. Let's go with Bob Woods because he'll be popular, but let's get unique with this stack and we'll add Van Jefferson too. He should give us some salary to have some fun with. So we'll go Van Jefferson. He'll be kind of our probably single digit percenter here. Even if he gets some steam from some guys this week, I can't imagine him coming in like more than 40%.
People see Tampa Bay too, and they just don't want to play guys against Tampa Bay. So
we'll run this double stack. I don't know if we'll run it back yet because I would have loved to run it back with AB, but obviously I'm not going to go with Scottie Miller. So let's kind of press on here. Let's open with the first game. We'll lock in just the value of Austin Eckler.
Okay.
Because like I said, this is a running back week where you either pay up for the big dog or Dalvin, or you kind of piece it together.
Yeah, and they're only $200 apart too. That's kind of interesting, and no CMC on this slate, so that's interesting too.
Yeah, no Aaron Jones, who I think is in a tremendous spot. Yep. And those guys are off the board. So we'll go with Eckler, and we'll run Eckler back with Kelsey for all the reasons we talked about. The two high safety looks. Him leading the NFL in all those stats against two high safety looks. So it is a pay up for a big guy. Like FanDuel never gives you a cheapie on Kelsey.
Right. He's always super expensive.
It's a lot for a tight end, but it's a tight end that is basically an elite receiver. So I'm going to keep telling myself that it's worth it.
6,400 the rest of the way, Reeb. So if you want to jam in some sort of defense to give you an idea where you're at, sometimes that's helpful at this point.
All right, let's run a stack with two value plays here that aren't in the games we talked about, but I think it'll give us access to the games we did talk about.
Okay.
And let's run Saquon plus the Giants D.
Saquon. All right. What's the Saquon take before we move on? Because he is so cheap, $100 more than Cordero Patterson. I said it earlier this week. Like, what do you even do with that? Like, do you just like pray that he's going to get the touches that he should, that he's getting healthier, but the price tag is just daring you to play him.
Yeah, that's really all it is right here. It's a five box running back, that is just this cheap. I think he'll be popular. I also think, though, that there are great pivots. I think the Giants passing game is a great pivot off of Saquon's price. I think both Sterling Shepard and I think Kenny Galladay is a good tournament play this week, too, because he gets the types of targets we like, and the targets have been there. And especially the squeaky wheel, him yelling at Jason Garrett a little bit. I like the little narrative street. I think those guys are good pivots off Saquon with Daniel Jones if you want to play Daniel Jones. But I don't know if Daniel Jones is the kind of guy I like to play in DFS necessarily for the ceiling. I don't know if he has the kind of ceiling, the requisite ceiling I like, but I think the Giants passing game is a pivot if you just want to get off this price. I do think Saquon's price is going to draw a lot of just what the hell I'm going to play it.
Right. Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah.
But I'll try to run it a little bit different because I put him in with Van Jefferson, and I'll add the Giants D as well against this Falcons offensive line that has just been a travesty to open the season. So that should free up
8K the rest of the way, so you can pretty much
play
now
we're cooking.
You want. Yeah.
All right, now we're cooking. 8K. Dude, I got a flex
and a wide receiver left.
So
you could add Tyreek to it. You could go to Tyler Lockett if you
wanted
to get a one-off.
Double chief stack with Eckler?
You could, but I don't know.
What does that give me left?
A little mini stack. I don't mind that. That gives you 7,300 left in the flex. So then you're sitting there staring in the face.
What is Justin Jefferson?
Justin Jefferson, I think he's so Justin Jefferson, you're 100 away from Justin Jefferson. So you're
the dreaded $100.
Yeah,
every
you
time.
Could if you really wanted to, you could bring it back now if you wanted to, though, with Godwin. So that would make some sense, or Evans. But man, 7,300. There's really you're kind of just outside of that range of like Justin Jefferson, Stephon Diggs, those type of guys. So
100 short of J. Jeff, because I do like Justin Jefferson. What is DK? DK 70?
72. So you could play DK. Yep.
So we're basically down to either running it back with DK or Mike Evans, right? I think that's
or Godwin. You have enough for Godwin as well.
Yeah, I think like for the reasons I laid out, that I think that I would prefer if you're gonna go with a Bucs receiver, it would be Evans. But do I just want to go DK? DK.
I don't know. This is your team, Reeves.
Let's go Evans because I think DK is going to be so much more popular, and it runs back with our Rams guys. So let's go with Evans.
Love it. Rich Hribar, everyone. Let me know in the comments your favorite game stack for week 3. Make sure you guys follow Rich on Twitter at Lord Reeves. Reeves, let the people know where else they can find you.
I'm at Twitter at Lord Reeves, like you said, sharpfootballanalysis.com. I do a podcast with Dan Pizzuta called The Sharp Angles, where we kind of do more of like a real NFL game breakdown, not really fantasy centric. I'm on Roto Grinders Pick 6 every Thursday, 2:30 with Joe Holka and all you guys.
Love it, man. Good luck this week.
Absolutely good.
See ya.